Hi, I'm Amy Whalen, and welcome back to Table Flipping Housewife. If you would like to see how I turn this Holly Hobbyish country with a K cabinet into something rich and masculine and beautiful, then just keep watching. I recently spent the weekend in Helen, Georgia, junking with my friend Susan. I was looking for a table or a desk to restore for you, and I was coming up with nothing. So on our way back home, we stopped in this little hole in the wall, and I discovered this cabinet. I called her over and I said, "This one speaks to me." And Susan said, "That speaks to you?" And I said, "Yeah, it does." So I scooped it up and brought it home. So I was showing my family when I got home, and I was telling them the idea I had for it, and they liked it. My son Sean said, "I might be interested in that in my apartment." He's getting ready to move in 2 weeks, and he said, "But if I take it, I'd rather you not paint it." Now, let me give you a little feedback. This cabinet was made very crudely. You can see the nail holes and you can see the different grades of wood. They're pine sides and they have a couple knots in them, and what I would have done would have been to fill in the crevices of those knots, sanded it, smoothed it, and painted it. But he said, "Mom, please don't paint it. I'd like you to keep those rustic elements of it." We both love that it has a latch on it. Definitely wanted to keep that. I gave him an idea of what I wanted to do with the door. He liked it. I told him what I wanted to do with the base. He agreed with that too. He just said, "Mama, please don't paint it. I want to see those crude, rustic elements." And that's what I did. And it really came out beautiful, and frankly, looks nothing like this anymore. So if this kind of content interests you, please be sure to subscribe to my channel before you leave. And if you like what you see, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. I would love your feedback. So let's get started. So as you saw before, I gave the piece of furniture a good wipe down with Krud Kutter to remove the dirt, grime, and any oily buildup. And then I did follow up with fresh, clean water to remove the residue of the Krud Kutter. It's so important to have clean, oil-free furniture so that it will accept the paint or varnish well. Now, if you know anything about me, you know I love to add new legs, and so this was very easy to remove the screws. And then once all the screws were removed, it was easy to take a hammer and just punch the pieces of wood out. Once I had all those panels removed from the bottom, I used a hammer to push the screws, or those, I don't know what it was exactly they attached it with, but as you can see, I was able to hammer them to the other side and pull them out with pliers. Now I went ahead and removed the hinges, and I did reserve them because I knew I was going to give them a good cleanup and spray paint them with black and reuse them. And then I was delighted to find out that that painted panel was simply held in place within that frame, you could say, by staples. And so I was able to easily push that panel out from the other side. And then there were some little staples that remained, so I just pulled them out with some pliers. So at this point, I had the panel out, but I needed to figure out what to put within the frame of that door. I contemplated burlap. In fact, I tried using burlap. I didn't like the way that looked. I contemplated chicken wire, decided that was just too country, and came across this product called Lincane at Home Depot. It's an aluminum sheet, and they have different designs. This one is kind of a coppery color, and it looks very much like cane, which I knew I couldn't afford. This was a very large sheet. You don't have to get such large sheets. This one, I don't know what size this dimension is. 36 by 36, so 3 feet by 3 feet. And I knew I only needed a part of it. So that was an investment, but I have more to use on a different project. So I ended up purchasing this one, knowing I would need to cut it. And that's when Sean suggested that I use his Dremel using a rotary cutting disc meant for metal. I believe this is the one that I put on the Dremel. By the time I was finished, it had been worn down to this. And that was a first for me. I had never used his Dremel.
It was a challenge at first to cut it until I noticed that it would be easier to do small areas pulling the Dremel toward me. So I had to be very careful to stay out of the way of it. Now you'll notice it's letting off a lot of smoke, and I will tell you something I learned. This had a very, very stinky smell, and I realized as I was cutting it I really should have been wearing my respirator, but I was in the zone and I didn't go get it. But if you ever do this, wear a respirator.
But that was a new experience. Ta-da!
Now that the metal was cut, I needed to prepare it to spray paint it black. So I wiped it down. I had found a bottle of alcohol and water mixture. I think we used it to clean off the frost from our windshield. Anyway, I sprayed that on the metal, wiped both sides really clean, and then dried it. And then I used Rustoleum 2x Ultra Cover in semi-gloss black to give both sides a good coverage of paint. Then I got to the base of the cabinet again. I removed the latch. And then sanded the whole cabinet, paying extra attention to the top. Keep in mind, Sean didn't want me to paint it, so I had to give it a super good sand because I knew he wanted me to stain it. And you're going to notice in a little bit, you might see it now, there were 2 spots on the top of the cabinet. It looked like someone had dripped clear lacquer on it, and it was really hard to sand off, but I did my best and got it sanded. And I sanded it down to the raw, clean wood.
So after I sanded the entire piece, I wiped it down clean, and I was ready to do something with the base. So you know that I've already removed that intricate little carving at the bottom. Didn't like that. But I want to elevate this now, and here's the secret. What I'm making is a bar. So I ordered some hairpin legs from Amazon, and I thought that I filmed opening the box and talking about them, but I can't find it. So I'll insert a picture of what I ordered on Amazon. So I got them in, and you'll notice from this video where I was pulling the staples out of the base that it's kind of a cavernous area underneath the base of the cabinet. And I needed to build up the base within that area in order to install the legs. I kind of played a game of Tetris at home because I have many piles of wood. So I went around that backyard and in all my little hidey holes, and I found wood that I could stack up within that area to make it a flush level for the legs. And hopefully by looking at some of these images, it'll make more sense.
So you can see on the right hand side that the blocks are already secured first with glue and then 3-inch construction screws. I've even installed one of the hairpin legs. And what I'm doing now is pre-drilling where my leg screws are going to go. The wood blocks on this side are already secured with glue, and I'm about to drill them into the base of the cabinet with the construction screws. Every now and then I make sure that they're not poking through to the inside of the cabinet. I love these screws. You don't have to pre-drill. They're amazing. I start to attach the legs. And I struggle. And I realized later that I didn't drill large enough pilot holes. My husband Kevin said that he could actually hear me upstairs. I'm down in the basement. He could hear me from upstairs laughing at myself. I ended up pre-drilling larger holes and re-securing the legs, and I'm not going to bother to show you all that. It was a hot mess. So I got all 4 legs securely attached, and then I noticed you could see all the blocks on the back side of the piece that I had put in place, and I didn't like it. So I'm using hardwood plywood to cover that area. So I've already cut it to size, and I'm applying some wood glue first. And then I'm putting that plywood on top, and you'll see that I use my Porter cable brad nailer from Home Depot to secure it in place. I used 1-inch brad nails. I love this new tool of mine.
Okay, so first, when I turn the cabinet over, I see the blocks exposed. I don't like it, gotta clean it up, right? So I'll put the backer board on it, right? And then I notice that there's a gap between the backer board and the cabinet. Now, you might be thinking, Amy, it's the back, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that I'm just a little OCD. If you haven't figured that out by watching my videos, and I want to clean it up, especially since this is either going to be gifted to my son or I'm going to have it for resale. So I want to clean that up. I like nice crisp lines, and I like things to look pretty even on the inside and on the back side. So now I'm going to go ahead and fill in that gap, and then proceed to sand and then on to staining the cabinet.
It's finally time to stain the bar. But first, I need to add the pre-stain conditioner. I applied the pre-stain conditioner with a lintless rag. This conditioner is so important when you're staining because it seeps into the wood and it enables your stain to evenly take to the wood. It avoids you getting any splotches of darker or light areas of stain. I applied it. You have to then go on to proceed to stain within 20 minutes, I believe the instructions say. Now, at this point, I've stained most of the bar, and I did realize almost immediately that the provincial stain simply wasn't going to be dark enough. I knew Sean wanted a darker stain, so I switched to the walnut, the dark walnut. It's a little difficult to stain the inside of the cabinet. In fact, I wasn't going to at first, but I since decided I should. That's why I've removed the tape. But when you apply stain, you need to go with the grain of the wood, which I'm doing my best to do here. And then after you apply the stain, it is important to go back and wipe off any excess stain. If you don't do that, it just sits on the wood and gets super sticky, and you don't want to deal with that mess. Now that was an oil-based stain, and I am applying a water-based polyurethane by Varathane. And so it's so important when you switch from an oil-based stain to a water-based poly coat that you allow that stain at least 48, if not 72 hours to dry, which is what I've done. Now for the first time, I'm going to use my Wagner sprayer to apply the poly. So that was a new experience for me. I had not used my sprayer to apply the polyurethane before, but I loved it. Talk about avoiding any streak marks from your brushes. This was super easy to do. I did add a smidge of water to the poly because it was a very warm day, and I wanted the water to enable the poly to take a little bit longer to dry so that it would have time to settle out and smooth. Now, and that's what the water does. Now, I realized at this point two things. My polyurethane is starting to drip. I was a little too heavy-handed. I also realized I wasn't wearing my respirator. So I ran inside for a foam brush. I'm smoothing out those drips. And then I put on my respirator and I proceeded to finish spraying the entire piece with the polyurethane. I did end up putting on 3 coats of the polyurethane, waiting about an hour and a half, 2 hours between coats, and also sanded very lightly between the coats of poly with a 400 grit sandpaper. I was very light-handed. I just wanted to smooth out any fibers that may have been raised when the wood got wet from the poly. So I sanded it very lightly, wiped it off for dust, and then proceeded to put those 3 coats of poly. Now, since this is a bar and I knew the top would be wet, I also decided to use Dixie Belle's Gator Hide. It is super repellent to water or any liquids. So I wanted to add 2 coats of Gator Hide to the top as well. When you apply this, you put some on a paper plate and you dip your sponge in and wipe the excess off your sponge. Now, I like to start on my edges first. In just a moment, my camera died. And so I'm going to ad-lib later, this separate clip, how I did the rest of it. So again, dip your sponge into the Gator Hide, wipe off the excess, and then I like to start in the middle of the piece. I start in the middle, I swipe right, I swipe left, and then I smooth it out with 1 stroke. This Gator Hide is amazing and it will dry smooth, but you just can't fiddle with it too much. So apply from the middle to the edges, smooth across, and then let it be. I put on 2 coats of Gator Hide in this manner, also lightly sanding in between and wiping off that dust before applying that 2nd coat. Then check your edges just to make sure there aren't any drips. Then I got to attaching the metal cane to the door. Now, this cane has, I call it cane, it has holes in it, and so I placed it on the frame of the door in a place so that I could use one of the existing holes to install the handle. I did have to make that 1 hole a little bit larger with hammer and nail, and that's what I just did there. So I put the handle in place, and then I used these carpet tacks. They're already black, and a hammer to simply nail the metal in place. Again, this metal cane has existing holes, and so I just used those existing holes to tap the nails in. And I left maybe 3 inches in between each nail and went all the way around the frame of the door. This was so easy. I will definitely be using this product again in future furniture restorations. Then, with everything dry and ready to go, I started to reattach the hinges. You can see at this point I have spray painted them. And that door kept swinging open, so I went ahead and then attached the latch after getting that first hinge on. That latch held the door in place, and then I went on to attach that 2nd hinge. Now, the knob I put on was not black, and I didn't like the way it looked, so I took it outside and I spray painted it black. As you see, it's black here now. I then put a little bit of that same spray paint, it's the same paint I used for that metal cane, and I touched up the screws that I used to reattach the hinges and to attach that handle. And then I was done.